Welcome and thank you everyone for coming to the Internet of Value Foundation New York episode 3 open discussion. And Kashta, thank you for coming up so quick, man. You were ready to come up before I think I was. I'm sorry about that. I was just setting up the thank you everyone for coming. Setting up the YouTube. Sorry.
Nah, glad to be here, man. Look forward to what today's discussion is going to be. So yeah, just looking forward to another great space.
Is there anything you'd like to talk about, or that you've seen happen in the space today that's on the top of your mind?
I ran across a few little things this morning, but nothing, big enough for me to kind of really mention anything about it. It's been kind of quiet in these crypto streets. I know, we're going over a lot of the same information as regards to the case and some of the other stuff, new developments and stuff with stuff like that. But nah, not really any like, jaw dropping information that's came out lately.
Yeah, I feel like the only thing I saw today was the SBF, got extradited to the United States, and that he's posting $250 million in bail to get out for the time being.
Yeah, I guess if we're going down that route, it was also interesting that his girlfriend is allegedly taking a plea bargain in this case as well, right? So she's taking some guilt that'll definitely put some pressure on him because that's kind of how those things work, right? You got a co-defendant now saying, "Oh yeah, we did commit a crime," so it becomes kind of hard for you to then argue that you didn't. Um,
Yeah, very
yeah,
interesting position, right? Because she's facing like I think 110 years or something if convicted of all of the crimes. So obviously, plea deal, like you said, would be something much less. But yeah, interesting how she jumped right on it, right? Although he's up for bail with, which is strange, even though it's $250 million, which is probably more than anybody that I know could afford to pay for bail to get out. Uh, it's it's uh it's interesting the position that both of them are in.
Are you guys talking about SBF and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the only thing I saw really that popped out today. Different.
Did you see the bit that I think it was Stock Talk Weekly or something like that put up there? I'll put it up on my timeline as well. She's actually been working with the feds for like, I think it's since January or something like that this year.
Oh, that's very interesting. Which would make
Yeah, so that they just unsealed the document saying that Caroline's actually been working with the feds this whole time. So very interesting. I'll pin it up on top, man. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. And if any, like I said, if anybody has anything else that they would like to talk about topic wise, please feel free to hit the request to come up. Bet, I hope you're feeling better, man. I know that you weren't feeling good yesterday, so I thank you for coming to the space still, though.
yeah. I'll just quickly speak to this since you were on the thread that I was on, or I was on the thread that you were on, because I think you were probably there first. But yeah, at the end of the day, man, like I saw the comment about the NFT, and that's the thing, right? Like, there's a lot of people who may be hot on NFTs, some lukewarm, some not so much. But again, I think we all need to respect people's freedoms and perspectives, and that if and I'll just use Shellfish as an example here, so I apologize. But if Shellfish finds a picture of a mermaid, something that she likes and she thinks her daughter might like, or whatever the case may be, her ability to buy that, picture, whether it's in an NFT version or otherwise, right, is her freedom and her right. And I think it's kind of asinine, right, for people badgering people about, what they find quality in, right? That's going to be in the eye of the buyer or beholder, is traditionally said. So I think that again, man, we all need to kind of respect people, and that hey, whatever they find value in is what they find value in. Because we loosely term, well, I don't say we, but sometimes people loosely throw around this scam word, right? And that was what I was really objecting to. Like, scam really implies the intent of the issuer to basically take your money for nothing, right? To promise you something and then not give it to you. Like, that's a scam. If you're buying something knowing full well that it's just a picture, right? But you choose to buy it, that's your business. And I think it's very disrespectful for other people to come in and interject as outsiders in someone else's kind of transaction and what they kind of perceive as value. So I hope we're all kind of respectful of others in that regard. And I just wanted to get that out.
Completely agree. And that's, you know, and that was the 100% the reason I was on that thread, right? Because I felt like there was more of a targeted attack than anything on that. And I know I love Egyptian. I know how he can be sometimes, but it's just like as you said, just because we don't perceive something to be valuable, and I don't, right? That's the whole concept of the way that NFTs are used today. Personally, I don't find it as valuable as I think that NFTs will be in the future of the use case behind them. But it doesn't stop the fact that if other people like them and think that they're valuable, well, then that makes them valuable. You know, that's just like you said, Costa. Completely agree. And I think that's a good way to tie into the internet of value, right? Is always in the end of the day, the value that will be exchanged from one individual to the next, or AI to AI, or whatever the means may be, right? It's only because we perceive whatever we are spending our value on to be important to us, and so nobody should ever be able to say what's right or wrong for one person to like to spend their value on.
Yeah, good point, right? Because the internet of value really does imply that, value could be anything almost literally, right? As long as that community is acknowledging it as a value, treating it as value, has demand for it, right? Then the internet of value in its ideal scenario is just saying, hey, look, I can hold value in my community or with my thing, and it doesn't really matter as long as my community supports it. But then if I need to make payments, I can literally pay with my value, right? But that person receiving value could then receive value that they perceive as value as well, right? So it becomes this awesome relationship of like pay with what you have. And if you're particular about what you receive, then receive only what you want, right? And it makes a lot of things that were traditionally illiquid that could never act as an actual payment in the concept of ability that we have to make a payment today, right? Because you could have said, hey, look, I had this old motorcycle that, it was value to me. That motorcycle wasn't really liquid, right? And so the internet of value is taking us to a point where these assets can become liquid enough that they can actually act as payments. And I think that that's a brilliant part of the internet of value that goes overlooked sometimes.
Yeah, I completely agree, and this it brings me into like AI to AI payments because it's not something that's talked about a lot, but to think how valuable machine to machine payments will be in the future, the amount of transactional output that will be consisting of just AI to AI makes me think that there's the limit of the amount of transactions that our species will be outputting will be in the hundreds of thousands uh, of trillions per second. So it's just I think I said that correct, right? That would be, or would it be hundreds of trillions? Yeah, sorry, it would be hundreds of trillions. I think the number I'm trying to think of.
Just referencing back to that Caroline Ellison thing as well. That tweet has actually been removed from Stock Talk, so I don't know if it was misinformation or whichever, but it's definitely been scrubbed off the internet. I'm going to go have a bit of a look on the SEC website and see if there's anything there too.
And that's not, you just reminded me. Empower Oversight. I retweeted it earlier, but they just did a post of more information that they're asking for the SEC on other lawsuits as well that they've put out after crypto entities or crypto exchanges, and they want the files and the paperwork behind them and the evidence and everything. And it's good to see that they are sticking with the pressure on the SEC to try and expose with the utilization of FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information to Act, information and everything that they're doing in the back end.
Well, I find it pretty funny. Like, I mean, one of the largest claimants from BlockFi is actually the SEC as well. So they, I mean, if they did their due diligence in the first place when FTX actually, bailed out BlockFi, they would have been able to see where the money came from FTX. And you'd think, in a regulatory sense, I mean, if they're one of the major creditors from BlockFi, they would have known where the money came from to be able to actually make that whole situation happen. But it looks like, they don't. I just find that really hard to believe.
Yeah, speaking to that right quick, there does seem to be another little risk factor raising its head in that the SEC allegedly claimed that the FTT exchange token was definitely a security. If that starts to proliferate, like a lot of these exchanges that have tokens may suffer some difficulties, right? Because BNB could be another one, as well as a lot of these other exchanges that carry tokens. So that may present a big risk factor going forward too. Although I do kind of lean on the side that those things kind of act as securities myself, and I know a lot of people may not like that, but you know, uh, yeah, if this thing implodes with exchange tokens, man, it could be a shock to the market as well. So maybe something to look out for.
I've been waiting.
Well, that's the major discussion on Binance at the moment as well. So that Mario space just before, basically, they're all going through trying to sort of unravel the premise of Binance being insolvent and how that's all going to work out, and then the changeover from BNB for all these original investors and all this kind of stuff. And like I totally agree. I mean, you got to think. I mean, if your major use for that token is directly towards that exchange, then yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense that it is a security. I just find it really strange that like the last one basically to be able to fall in this industry at the moment is going to be Binance. And I mean, the dude's got so much money behind him, whether some of that's him BNB or whatever it is, but the push to be able to like oust Binance from the sector just seems like a really good narrative at the moment. I mean, there was no issue before. I mean, he's supposedly based in Dubai. I mean, we're talking about Binance US and all the other districts that he's put into as well. But then we start looking at something like, Japan, and now he's under a regulatory process in Japan as well. So I just wonder if it's just, that narrative to be able to push out all this stuff. And I mean, we all know the SEC is not really doing anything. They could have stopped half of this stuff from happening. Plus the fact they were meeting with, Sam Bankman-Fried for God knows how long. So they knew exactly what was going on there. You attach that to the BlockFi situation. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to be able to think that that governing body did not know what was going on, especially when, like, the SEC directly is the biggest creditor when it comes to BlockFi. So, take it with a grain of salt, but it's purely disgusting at this point.
That's a good word. Emphasis on disgusting, if you can. But I completely agree. And in this particular instance, we know that calendar wise, that Gary Gensler met with Sam Bankman-Fried personally on a lot of occasions, which is what I like people are talking about, but needs to be talked about way more.
Well, there's definitely a connection there, and I mean whether they were, I mean obviously they've got that bill that they were trying to be able to put forward to be able to change some of the laws and things like that, especially when it came to IEX, which is something that people really aren't talking about, which could have actually broken this whole sector back into the stock market as well. So that if that was continuing to happen and they actually got some regulatory process to be able to allow that to be able to happen, we're starting to be able to talk about, future stable coins being, almost misguided from, FTX. It could have been a massive big fallout from that. And that, to tell the truth on that too, I think that was actually a bit of a planned expose, because if they could have brought everything into that as well when it comes to, the crypto world and attaching that to the stock market, I mean, that could have just brought down the whole industry, and that's exactly what they're looking for this collapse. So I think Binance did us a bit of, or CZ did us a bit of a favor to be able to stop that from happening, because that's really stopped the US from, or like the government on that side to, crash the whole entire market, including the stock market as well.
Well, interesting thing, right, about Tether, right, though, and Binance. Binance holds 20% of the Tether that is in existence by itself. Um, Almeida, if I'm not mistaken, held a significant portion of Tether as well. So um, it's very, very questionable on that end. On what will Tether do to the actual exchange itself from the flow of the exchange in the market, but yeah, nonetheless, I think just like Kosh just said, I think any exchange that's created a token um, is is abundantly clear that they were selling a security, and if they sold it to American investors, we'll probably have to deal with that in the future. That's crypto.com, I think, also, and BitTrue, right? BitTrue has their own token. Um, Obviously, Binance. There's a lot of when you think about it, there's a lot of exchanges that have actually created their own token. The only ones I think about that don't really have it are Coinbase and Kraken.
And Uphold.
Yep. Well, I don't even think of them. I mean, I know they're a brokerage, but
Yeah, I know.
if
I was just throwing them in because it's a sign that you're being a responsible person running an exchange when you don't get into the questionable activity, right? Because again, even if you got away with it, even if it's not determined to be some security in the future, when the time that you issued it and started selling it to the people, you had no freaking idea what it was going to be labeled, right? You just jumped out there, started getting the revenue from it, and I think it just says something about the people who don't go chasing other people's dollars, right? We definitely need to support those kind of people and limit any activity with people who kind of do otherwise, right? Like those are the things that we really need to take as actual lessons and pass to the community. Like start supporting people who do things right, and let's remove any financial activity from people who even do something questionable, right? Because we can all go back and forth about whether something is security, whether it's not security, whether it's a shit coin or not. But if it's anything that's kind of questionable and it's not and it's questionable on the people's money, I'm encouraging people to at least be patient, right? Like you're not going to miss anything. Like it's funny to me how people get FOMO even in a bear market, right? Like you're not going to miss anything. These coins are setting new lows at the moment. Like, you don't have to buy every project and buy everything. Like let some of the technology prove itself out, right? And then once it proves itself out, your risk factor has reduced significantly, right? From trying to be in early, right? Because when you're trying to be in early, particularly on something questionable or unproven, right, you're assuming a lot of risk. And we need to acknowledge that so that when that shit blows up, we don't go saying, oh, well, they scammed me, they rug pulled me, they did this, they did that. No, you were really chasing gains, right? And so I always go back to personal responsibility. So yeah, that's my kind of take on it. Sorry.
100%. And there's obviously not even close to enough of that anywhere. But 100%. First thing first is you make sure that you're completely in knowledge that this could go, that your value could be completely lost. And so, yeah, you're taking a risk, and people have to acknowledge that. Fortunately, I don't think people like to do that. But with the market maturing and us getting some more clarity behind things, and then insurance, and I think there'll be a little bit less than that I'll have to be worried about. But yeah, I mean, there's really it's just not nearly enough of that going around. Right on the hit the nail on the head, though. I think personally.
Yeah, because I love Erie's video she did a while back where she was kind of giving a blueprint of how you could take a approach, right? Because I don't say it's like the approach of evaluating some of these projects, right? And evaluating the team is a big part of it. Like a lot of the things that I have not gotten caught up in while other people seem to be engaging in it has been because the teams are questionable to me at the end of the day, right? Like, if the person who's running it all, introducing it to the public is of questionable character, Like that's the biggest red flag of all to me, right? So I'll take a pass on a lot of the stuff that comes from questionable people, right? Like think about it. We're talking about exchange tokens. Solo and Core is kind of like central to that whole thing. We didn't even mention them, right? And there's another questionable individual, questionable project, but then yet, we still see a lot of narratives and people promoting it like it's going to be the biggest thing in the financial industry, right? So just be very cautious of this stuff, people. Like I know everyone here is very responsible. I see the names. People been around a while, so y'all probably don't need to hear that, but we definitely need to share it with others, man.
Yeah, and listen, just like you said, I'm recording this on YouTube, right? Other than it being recorded on Twitter, which I don't think lasts forever, but it's for people in the future too. Who knows? Somebody listens to this 2 years in the future, and it's just coming into the space. So I'm sure the same concepts and ideologies, the ideals that we use in this space, can be taken out into multiple aspects of life. And so I completely agree with the sentiment as well. I enjoy when you come, Kasha. I thank you for coming up and speaking today.
No, always, man. You hold good spaces, man. Like I've tried to dip in some of these other rooms, right? And we can have open discussion about this as well. But I've tried to dip into some of these other rooms, even some XRP rooms, right? But and I'm not going to talk bad about them, but I'll just say it doesn't resonate with me, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of hopium, right? There's a lot of even what I would say misinformation. So, like the fact that you continue to do these things, man, get the right information out there is very important. So, I'm glad that you're continuing to keep these spaces going in some capacity, and we need to invite more people over here even if they want to have some of these crazy discussions, like have them over here with people who are more practical in nature, right? And then, don't go to your other little what do they call it, like where information just bounces around the same people. I forgot the word I'm looking for here,
Yeah, it's
but
like
echo chamber, right? Don't just continue to repeat that shit in an echo chamber where everybody's agreeing with you, no matter how silly it is. Like, yeah, come to a room with more practical people and let's see what the merit of some of the ideas actually are at the end of the day.
Well, there's a lot of science that goes on behind these conversations too, and also regulatory processes and realized gains and we're talking about money and some of the future of money here too. So I like there's always going to be a bit of a narrative pushing towards these 1,000Xs and all this kind of stuff, because I mean everyone wants to be able to make it in some sort reasonable form or whatever. But yeah, I think it is very important to be able to sort of, quell some of those ideas in a way. It's great, as you say, like echo chambers are fantastic to be able to get that hype up or narrative up about a certain subject or like a currency or whatever. But yeah, it does need to be quelled at some point.
Yeah, and I don't personally mind a person speculating on some of the unknowns, right? There's a lot of unknowns in this space. So we're all probably going to cross a moment where we have to speak on something that may be a little less, explicit, maybe some gaps in it, right? And we fill in the gaps the best way we know how. But like when I tried to introduce the community to how I do my technical analysis, right? Um, I did that because I wanted people to see that if you're going to look to someone else for some technical analysis advice, like kind of think back to your old math teacher who said, don't just show me you got the answer, like show me your work, right? And that was important because the teacher could look if you had shown your work, if you actually went through the proper processes, if you actually knew what you were doing. Did you use a calculator? Did you cheat off of somebody else? Right? Like all those things matter. And a lot of times, what I see absent from a lot of technical analysis people in this space is they don't really show the work, right? They're not showing you anywhere on an actual indicator or the actual chart where they're getting their conclusions from, right? So it then becomes you're kind of really relying on fundamentals and you're dressing it up as technical analysis, or you're just wildly speculating, right? And I wanted people to be able to identify the differences between what an indicator may actually indicate and what a person is just feeding you from a narrative perspective. And I think that can help the community grow as well. Because again, if you haven't noticed, and if anyone wants to have a conversation about it, like that's what goes on with a lot of this so-called technical analysis, right? It's just a repackaging of fundamentals with a chart on the screen and saying, hey, look, this is what I think is going to happen from a technical analysis standpoint. And it's nothing technical about it at all. So just beware of that, people.
Yeah, I have to say I don't know TA well, but the things that you've explained, Kasha, about the 19 EMA, am I if I'm not mistaken? But I know you said the 19. Yeah, I've always enjoyed it how you post when you show it's working. And welcome,
Go ahead, Matt.
well, welcome up, man.
Hey, yeah, thanks for welcoming me up to the stage. Um, so I guess I could speak a little bit about um, I, I saw where you were heading, Kashta, about like technical analysis and stuff. I kind of started trading with the whole pandemic thing as well. I learned pretty quickly, however, like um, you know, like a lot of the TA and stuff like that. There seems to always be, different schools, right? It kind of reminds me of, like different schools of martial arts, all saying like we're the best and we're the best, and then there's these like I don't know, like it seems almost like pro wrestling where like, hey, who's the champion? And then there's like this competition of minds and a debate and stuff like that, and all of this is like really charming actually because really at the end of the day it's it's a search, right? At the end of the day, there is an uncertainty. There's spectators, there's pros, there's so what I'm really trying to get at though is that the diversity of views, the narratives, right? They all have value in their own way because they captivate an audience. They create a sense of learning, of qualia. It's kind of like when you gain a type of subjective experience and things click for you. There's like a spark, even if you learn something wrong, right? It kind of inspires you to like learn a little bit more, to study a little bit more, to meditate on it, and then naturally you just get better on your own through your own research. I think at the end of the day, this is actually the core of teaching. Um, Absent of actually being able to enter in one on one with a student, because here's kind of the problem with like teaching on YouTube, right? Is that you're kind of forced to be professor like, so you have to like teach all the right things, otherwise you kind of like get in trouble, right? People call you out, and there's too much reputation at stake, so there's way too much. but but it's actually way easier on a one-on-one basis. The problem with doing one-on-one is you don't have all the time in the world to do that, and basically you have to think of your rates of like how to make a living, right? Like you can't do it at like $10 an hour. It's got to be like 20 or 30 and above, and the only way to do that is to scale and get to a bigger audience. However, I think now there might actually be a second option, which is you can leverage chatbots. Now you can teach in an individualized manner, and it won't sound phony because chatbots are like starting to get really, really high in quality now. So, you know, what I want to say really is that, now that you are in kind of like now that you've built a reputation and a brand around teaching, of gaining followers, this is a really interesting opportunity now to leverage that influence and and potentially do something very, very unique with that following, right? If you can provide for your followers like like a 10x value, you know by doing like kind of like virtual one-on-ones via chatbots, because like again, you can encode whatever you want, like basically all your knowledge into that, and then that being kind of like an extension of yourself, and your own property, your intellectual property, really, I mean, it's 10x leverage, right? Who wouldn't want that? And it's 10x leverage, you know, without downside, essentially, right?
Let me just quickly agree with you, Matt. I definitely agree that a lot of the material still adds some kind of value. So I'm definitely not speaking against it from that perspective, right? Um, but I kind of approached it from like the way scientists actually kind of like bring us new discoveries and improvements in the world, right? And that scientists will do their due diligence. They'll put it through the scientific method, make sure it's repeatable, right? And then they may submit it so that their peers can then evaluate it, right? And if their peer can find a flaw, then the originator of that theory could then go back and adjust it based on what their peer may have found. Like in this space, crypto, it might be a bug, right? Or whatever it be. And so a lot of times that's how I approach it when I go to other TA guys. I'm like, hey, look, I'm not going against you because I want to be the best or I want to prove you wrong, right? It's just that collective effort to say that the consensus of information of people who are in it for honest reasons should be able to draw a more accurate conclusion for the people who are following along with any of us, right? And so that's the approach that I personally have. Is just to, hey, look, I found this, and maybe you do know a little more than I do in some aspects, right? So I'm gonna submit it to you. If you find some flaw in it, then I know that something's wrong. If you don't find a flaw in it, then it kind of validates the information even further, right? Because now it's been scrutinized by more than yourself and other people and still sound, right? And so that's the approach that I personally have. But I have found almost no one that's been as acceptive of criticism for the benefit of finding better methodology, and that has been depressing for me.
Let me answer that real quick. um Kashta, I sense that it's because you are going with the scientific approach, that you are optimizing for accuracy, which I applaud you, right? Like I love scientists, because they have this fundamental love for truth above all. However, this is my criticism of the scientific institutions and community too, is that they're not optimizing for teaching. And what I mean by that is that they're working so hard to get signal to noise ratio up that they're not focusing on really expanding the usefulness of their tools outwards. Now, I understand that you do both, right? Because like you are an outreach of that knowledge as well. But the problem is that the method itself of criticisms, feedbacks, dialogue, and getting really really deep down into like back testing, right? Because essentially that's how you kind of look at trading strategies, is back testing, um, or forward testing. Like you could actually have money at risk and then just like forward test and see, right? But what I'm saying is that the scientific method doesn't lend itself to the actual optimization of education, that goal, right? um, this is where I would actually depart. I mean, not because like I disagree with your approach, but I'm just saying that for learning, there has to be um, a kind of back and forth and confirmation. Otherwise, the best thing you can do for the learner is to inspire them, right? And then they have to do it on their own still. They use your material as, kind of like coverage, but they have to develop passion. Otherwise, they're still subject to the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, right? They still need to repeat it over and over again. And then they're basically forced into the memorization route, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for your feedback, man. I definitely keep all of that noted. So thank you, really. Go ahead, Steak.
Yeah, and welcome to the space, Steak. Thank you for coming up, man.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, sorry, it took me a while to unmute
You're all
myself.
good.
I was just wondering what the topic of conversation is. Is it TA in general, or is it in regards to a specific project?
Oh, anything that has with the Internet of Value, but they were talking about TA perspective there, and Kasha was just talking about they were talking about how to go about the teaching of the technicals.
Yeah, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with him.
General. Yeah.
I also think TA is a tool, just like there are other tools, and you use them when it's necessary. For me, it's not a gospel. It's just sometimes you just have to know a little bit more the specifics, but it also depends if you're a trader, right? And what your interval is with that trade. So, um, it, it all depends on when you enter or exit the market, I guess, from what the perspective is. And it's kind of, um, for me at least, hard to have a proper discussion about that because for obvious reasons, most people don't want to disclose their position or their wallet size. Um, so yeah, it just depends on the moment, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Steak. I wasn't really approaching it from like evaluating TA. I was really just kind of saying like at the end of the day, we're all trying to better our ability to disseminate information to the community. And they're just, some things that I have observed, and I use TA as an example because, and maybe you had missed it, and I'll just quickly restate it. A lot of things, at least, and again, this is only my perspective, but a lot of things that are promoted as technical analysis don't really come off to me as being technical in nature, right? They're more narrative in nature, fundamental in nature, being dressed up as technical analysis, right? And so I'm really just trying to get people to say, like, at the end of the day, be able to spot the red flags, whether it's from a technical analysis perspective that person is coming from, or whether they're allegedly giving you education, but then there's really no real education, right? They're just telling you, hey, look, I think the whole world's going to change around the XRP ledger and it's going to go to 50,000. Like at the end of the day, that's not very much education from my perspective, right? Um, and so I'm just trying to say, hey, look, be able to spot these red flags no matter what the actual topic of discussion may be, whatever they're trying to promote to you. Just be on the lookout for these little red flags that may help you from getting pulled in the wrong direction.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. That makes a lot of sense. I always run with the old adagium, like, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Right. But you know what is ironic about that? And coming from a culture and community that, has been pretty much, underprivileged, right? It seems like the people that don't have the money, who are trying to get out of difficult situations, become the biggest targets for that, right? At the end of the day, because you want to hope so bad that you can get out of your situation that it makes you more susceptible to hearing something and just wanting to believe it, right? And so
Oh
it,
yeah,
it,
but
it,
the thing is, if you look broader than one project, and you probably do, um, then there is a lot more narrative going on in this entire crypto or blockchain or Bitcoin space that helps in evaluating specific TA or filling in the holes. It's just that um, many people have a difficulty um, um, following a broad range of topics and seeing how they're connected. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with doing due diligence or doing TA is you never really know what someone knows, if that makes sense.
yeah, it kind of goes back to Matt point when he said it works better one on one, right? Because you can kind of ask those probing questions to know exactly what you need to be disseminating, right? And trying to do it in a just broad perspective makes it a little more difficult. But like you said, there's definitely some, ancillary benefits to a lot of this conversation, negative and positive, because I have witnessed that most people in this space, right, probably got more education around finance and how the world of finance works as a result of this crypto experience than probably they would have ever gotten otherwise. I think the same thing applies to the law. Like this case for XRP people, right, exposed them to a lot of legal theories and legal processes and
Yeah.
ideas that they've learned a lot about the law that they probably never would have understood otherwise,
Oh,
right? So I
sure, yeah.
do respect
And
those
let
ancillary
me
benefits.
let me say something a little bit um, provocative, or maybe
Ooh, what are you
counterintuitive.
wearing?
No, it's gonna be very provocative, in a
Gets the people going.
yeah, it'll get you going. Okay, there is such thing as negative education, and what I'm talking about in terms of negative education is that there is a one-on-one um, education that is going on, and that is when you believe in something and you buy, there is somebody who is selling it to you, right? And that is a one-on-one conversation. And if you lose afterwards, that is also a lesson that the other person is giving you, and they mean you harm. So, that's also one of the weird invisible lessons of the market, is that you know education comes in
Ah,
all different forms.
here's the thing, Matt. And I don't want to sound cocky or arrogant, but that's actually the part that's easiest for me, um, because of my own personal background. Yeah, quite a statement and provocative as well, I guess. But I used to do sales, and after that, did recruitment, and now I help people with a disability get back on their feet with a job. And it's very easy for me to distinguish bias in other people or their own characteristics and find flaws and red flags in that, whether someone is speaking the truth or not. So I don't really have an issue with filtering out what the bullshit is, if that makes sense. To me, it's still pretty easy to distinguish.
Yeah, I mean, once you know how, like, uh how 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 what's the saying, like, how the cake is baked, how the cookie was made, like how the dough was made. Once you know how it's made, right, you've worked in the symbolic arena, right? Because you've you deal with it on a day basis. So that is the psychology. It's like, if you were a wolf that hunts other wolves, then you know kind of like the signals. But what I'm kind of saying is, that, like, I guess for kind of the majority, um, when you put in when you say the word education, it's always meant in a very positive, flowery context. I would say that, some of the biggest lessons learned are through, kind of like the under route, right? The suffering route, and those often get kind of ignored in the entire framework of the experience. And this is why the market is somewhat misunderstood, is because there is this ambiguity of both, like, the positive and negative, and what I guess people want you to think, and versus how you should perceive it on your own experience, right? But yeah, I mean, thank you for that.
Yeah, I just want to say I actually got that, Matt, and so I actually agree with what you're saying there, right? Some of the best lessons come through kind of like what may be perceived as a negative, right? I just kind of share a quick little experience I had as a child, but we had the old space heaters back in the early '70s, and I was standing too close to it. My mom kept warning me, like, "Don't stand too close to that doggone heater." And as soon as she turned her back, I get as close as I could, right? Well, I burned myself, needless to say, right? And so trying to hide the burn because I knew she had told me not to be over there, right? I ended up doing it again, and she ended up discovering both burns, right? But I guarantee you, it didn't take me, another third time to know that I didn't need to be near that damn heater, right? So, like, it was a negative experience, but it definitely taught me something that was, beneficial, right, to my safety and health. So there's definitely benefits to the negative side. And sometimes we do probably pay too much attention to the roses and educational and that kind of side of the narrative, right? So I thank you for adding that to the dialogue.
the greatest lessons in life are sometimes the most unsatisfying of times. And Master, welcome up. You haven't yet. If there's any input you'd like to put in or change the topic, please feel free to. You there, Master of None?
I got one. If Master isn't
Yeah,
here.
go ahead.
Well, it's just a small nugget about Digibyte, but I think it's relevant for people maybe to at least have it in the back of their mind. I don't really want to make the space about Digibyte, but um, a few members of the community got a proof of concept with Shell, the oil company, and I thought it was pretty big news.
I did see that the other day. Yeah. Well, they're using
Oh yeah,
they partnered with a provider or an app, somebody who's building something on Digibyte, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man.
yeah. The
Yeah,
thing that they're building is a global compliant wallet.
yeah. Just real quick, Steak. I just want to say, and of course, this is Deaf Space, but this is just my opinion. So, yeah, I mean, it's the we talk about the internet of value. So there's no apprehension about speaking about Digibyte or anything else project wise that people think can add value to the concept of the internet of value, right? So I'm not
Oh, thank you.
exclusively about XRP or any particular one coin or nothing. From my perspective, you're welcome to add, because the technology, like again, we talk tech in this room, and so for people who are new to it, maybe not be aware, but we talk a lot of tech here. And when you get down to it, there's not a whole lot of technical differences, right? With a lot of these projects, what differentiates them is just how many people are buying into them, right? Like at the end of the day, because that's how a lot of people are rightfully or wrongfully judging these assets right by their price, right? But
Well, Um,
yeah,
I agree, but there's also a little more to it because depending on where legislation globally is going, some projects will survive and others won't. And I
oh,
think
agreed, agreed, big time.
so. It kind of depends on what you do, and the people that created the company DigiCorp, they are. I think they're market leaders in global compliance in crypto, and they're also working on through Threefold on a Web3 since 2014, like an actual Web3 from an infrastructure perspective, and they combine those two. So for enterprises, it's very interesting to have a currency system on a proof of work chain on the UTXO that is actually compliant globally. So you have the same, you don't have any issues with anti-money laundering, know your customer, or privacy legislation. And for an enterprise, that's very handy to have and to be as compliant as possible, especially if you're a multinational, because you have to deal with different legislation in different countries around the globe. So if you can do that with the same system, then you wouldn't need a different headquarters in every country dealing with different issues. You could just do it from one global headquarters. So it would make a lot of sense for enterprises to be very into this sort of stuff and to see big names like Lulu and Liquid Moly and now Shell buying into that is for me very bullish because I haven't seen it elsewhere over in the crypto or blockchain space.
Not when it comes to wallet compliance and KYC measures being, something of somebody's building to for a providers to interact with a blockchain in particular. Yeah, not you're right. I don't really, you know, especially when I think of like wallets or wallet creators who were trying to go that route so far. That was what it's funny because like Ripple tried to do that in it was like 2014, right? And they got sued right away. That was the whole FinCEN thing. It was like 2014, 2015, and so they got rid of their wallet and the whole concept of trying to do that. And it makes sense because it's right. They were trying to do it in America, and so wrong place to start probably trying to do something like that. But Matt, you got your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. It's when it comes to these types of things, there's always this really deep-seated political game. It's kind of like Microsoft had to deal with that decade-long antitrust case, and while the U.S. government was busy doing that, you know, Apple, Amazon, Google, did like basically took everybody's lunch, right? Um, because of this, hyper focus on that. So you kind of just need, I mean, for any kind of these types of innovations, you kind of just need the meat shield, so to speak. And I guess, like Ripple had to like eat glass in order to beat the meat shield in that case. But, you know, no matter what, it's kind of like whenever you talk about crypto, it it saves in terms of like the full body cost of of transaction fees and all that stuff. Like you think about like the meat world, you have to have consultants from big fours, audit your books, and that interface is is back and forth, time consuming. It consumes, your audit time, hurts both ways, right? It hurts you double. First, you have to get laid on the the consultant time fees, but also your own employees' work time, company time, and so you get dinged double on audits. In other words, so all redundancy is actually magnified in a sense. Um, but what would make me bullish about this is that again, this is the same principle. Somebody needs to be doing both, right? Somebody needs to be doing the meat
They
world.
they they are doing that, Matt. There's people involved in that project which have served on the Geneva Convention, the United Nations, and Davos. It's a pretty tough crowd that works behind the scenes on that project. So they got the political side of it figured out from a position far above U.S. Congress. So this is on the level of the European Union Commission and the White House, so to speak, in the U.S. So on the one hand, you see legislation in crypto going through the SEC and the CFTC, and on the other hand, you see things on a global G7, G20 scale, on a World Economic Forum scale, which a few of them are on that as well, and go from that perspective with the legislation. Whether that's a good thing or not, um, it is kind of interesting because I haven't seen that in a lot of different other projects.
Well, one of the so these types of projects usually are kind of done in a consortium, and so out of those like seven multinational companies, uh, you can have. I mean, it's still like basically a running experiment, right? So the way I kind of imagined the design would be like two of them run both the meat world double auditing. Basically, you have that type of accounting as well as auditing in like the regular one, and the others can kind of flow free. And it's through that savings of the others that it's kind of pulled together in order to kind of cost save into paying the auditing for that redundancy, that just basically just having that trail of that redundancy allows you to kind of mirror and learn from that consortium knowledge share, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because I've worked in kind of like in German research institutes, and these are generally how like project like scientific project um, discoveries are kind of like first shared among the consortiums, and then that's how they kind of pool and finance the stuff together. But by the way, I actually don't have many insights about you know gigabytes that project.
Did
I'm just speaking from yeah, from a hypothetical perspective.
Yeah, and that's why I always like when you come in and speak about it, steak, because I try to go to a lot of spaces for a multiple chains, just listen about what the community's talking about, and then listen to what devs are talking about, and then try and read up on it myself. And that's one. Other than the spaces that you're in, steak, which I have not seen actually you in any Digibite spaces recently, at least myself.
No, the community is more on Telegram, and um, I speak to many of them, at least the prolific ones, on a regular basis. There's a lot more going on with the entire project, but it's an incredibly small community. It's very grassroots, decentralized. I think from a crypto perspective, it's probably very big, but there's already a history. It's 8 years old. It's the longest UTXO chain. It actually solved the trifecta problem with a proof of work UTXO that actually scales with a block a time of 15 seconds. It's actually pretty damn awesome technology. It has 5 algorithms for mining protocols instead of one. So it's a lot more secure because in order to 51% attack it, you have to have um, 3 of the algorithms, and you have to have 51% on average on all 5 of them. And every single algorithm requires a different piece of hardware. So you're never really able to um, break the chain, so to speak. So from that perspective, to me, it's remarkable how undervalued it is, especially when I see what type of companies, enterprises I haven't even mentioned, and institutions are already eyeing on it. In my humble opinion, it's a better Bitcoin, but many Bitcoin maximalists don't want to hear it. And um, we'll see if it works, if it goes the enterprise route instead of the retail route, because in the enterprise route, there's just a lot more money and value than in retail. So eventually, that's the strategy, to just blow it out of the water. And a global compliance for enterprises might just actually do that. It would free up trillions on the chain. So yeah, I'm eyeing it. Um, I'm definitely eyeing it because it has the same issue with XRP where the price is always suppressed, and that annoys the hell out of me. That in this space, this cowboy land where everything happened, and 10 or 100 or 1,000 next, these really solid projects. There's a handful of them. They just they just get the entire market makers against them. It's interesting to follow, and I think there's a reason for it. It's just too fishy. And then those same chains are the ones that are being sued by the SEC. Go figure.
Yeah, what are the odds, right? Well, that is I think that's a good way to a note to end it on right there. It was a really great conversation. I thank you for coming in there at the end, Steak, and Matt Kashta, of course, man. You made the conversation today, and Alex. But of course, thank you for everybody who listens to this in the future as well, right? Because this information that we talk about in here is not just valuable to us as in today, but I record these, and so hopefully this is valuable to other people in the future who may not have this information that was talked about. And we will be back next week on Monday and Tuesday, or yeah, actually, I think I'm gonna Monday and Tuesday of next week, 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'll be hosting another space. I'm gonna hold off on the Thursday because I'm going to be busy with my son. But I really do thank everybody again for coming, and I hope everybody has a good rest of the night.
Thank you for having it, and everybody have a good day.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you all.